Good morning, everyone. My name's Sherry Corrier, the initiative lead for the Digital Access for All initiative. I want to welcome you all to the first in a three-part series, Suncoast Digital Connect, and thank you so much for being here today. This is a Learning Thursdays webinar series by our Digital Access for All initiative, sponsored by the Patterson Foundation. Want to introduce you just to the team of the Digital Access for All, who's kind of behind the scenes, in front of scenes, helping out to make sure today's information is generated to you actively, both in the chat. We'd love for you to participate by sharing information there. And then, of course, we're thrilled to have our first presenter here. As a reminder, the Patterson Foundation strengthens the efforts of people, organization, and communities by focusing on issues that address our mutual aspirations and foster wide participation. In our Digital Connect series, we have determined that we would really much make sure that we keep the momentum built leading up to the Suncoast Symposium. As you might know, some of you may not, Hurricanes Helene and Milton did a little number on our area, and we were forced to reschedule our Suncoast Symposium. You'll hear more about that later in the program, but it has been rescheduled for March 11th and March 12th in 2025 right here in sunny Sarasota, Florida. We've created the Suncoast Digital Connect series, 30-minute webinars that will delve deeper into those elements of digital inclusion and digital access. We have a presenter today that we are thrilled to have with us, Tom Kitchen Jr., and Tom is going to be talking about AI and all of the related things to especially emergency management. So Tom's information is listed here. We're really thrilled to have Tom here from really sunny, cool Pennsylvania, right, Tom? And with Tom's background, where he has a master's degree in emergency and crisis management from University of Central Florida. He is recognized by his peers across the country and in the state of Florida for that regional domestic security task force work, and he's a subject matter expert previously with Manatee County, Florida. So Tom, we're thrilled to have you here today, and we would love to turn it over to you for a great presentation.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for taking the time to hop on the call with us today, just to talk through some of the exciting ways that technology and futuristic technologies are advancing some of our work on emergency management across all the different phases, from preparedness into response, and then how we recover from disasters that impact our communities. So we'll kind of cover a broad swath of things today. I know we have a bit of time together, but yeah, let's jump right in. We'll hop on over to my least favorite slide here. This is just talking about me. I think Sherry did a great synopsis just for the folks who I haven't had the opportunity to meet in person before. While I am here in chilly Pennsylvania, right around the capital, my roots go back to Florida. I spend the majority of my earlier stages of my career in emergency management and public safety in Manatee County. So that's where I got started. That's where I consider my home state. So my roots are from there. I still stay as tuned in as I can to the goings on that affect the Florida throughout, but specifically in and around the area where I feel like a lot of folks on the call may be located as well. So that's as much as I'll say about myself. Again, thank you for having me here, but we can jump right in to the next slide there, where I think we'll talk a little bit initially about some of our considerations specific to natural disaster preparedness. I think emergency managers in kind of the classic sense for most folks are often looked at as being the weather people. if you will. We're kind of the break glass in case of emergency, folks that get calls when we have storms bearing down on our communities. But really, most emergency management departments are considered all hazards, and the space in which we operate and the different types of events that we support seems like they grow every year. Year over year, we have new and interesting challenges that our organizations are presented with. So we have to be able to be adaptable. And sometimes those are areas that we might personally not have a lot of subject matter expertise in. We might not have tools already built to support some of these different types of incidents. So we like to leverage technology where we can to help kind of fill in those gaps that we might have, and also to supercharge our efforts so we can be more impactful for the folks out in our communities that may obviously be affected by some of these types of emergencies. But again, natural disaster preparedness tends to be a big bucket of the work here. So I want to talk a little bit again about how impactful it might be if you can imagine the scenario. If we could consistently and more accurately anticipate where and when weather emergencies, for example, are likely to occur. We're seeing more and more advanced tools available to us every day. And the folks who support us, like those folks at the National Weather Service, um, these tools can analyze things like historical data. They evaluate weather patterns that are obviously changing year to year. They can incorporate information from local events, planned or spontaneous otherwise. And a whole multitude of other factors. So consider all the different data streams that can be coming in and how challenging that can be for just one person or even a small team to try to manage those and glean insights from. So the technology tools that we have access to now can help with that. But essentially, they combine all these different streams of information and help us to forecast the potential for these spikes in emergency events. This, of course, can allow for things like proactive resource staging. And when I say resources, that can be people and things, but that helps us to ensure that our staff, our first responders, equipment, ambulances, and things like that are in the right place at the right time. And we know that in any kind of an emergency, we hear this, every second counts. So these different types of systems that are becoming more available can and do process significant amounts of data in real time that give us up to the minute information on essential elements like hospital capacities, road conditions, ambulance locations, shelter statuses, and so much more across our entire community. That way we can develop and enhance those and integrate them thoughtfully. So if you can, imagine a city not far from where you are that may have adapted an AI system recently and implemented in its emergency response network. And one night, multiple calls come in from 911 reporting that there's a fire. Say it's at a senior care facility or a residential facility of some type. And within seconds, these new tools like AI algorithms can analyze the location and nature of the emergency. They can assess the current capacity and capabilities of nearby hospitals. They can calculate the optimal routes for responders that also consider current traffic conditions, road conditions, if we're in maybe a hurricane impact time. And then they can also do things like pre-alert those receiving facilities to prepare for potential specific types of patients. So maybe in that instance, it's smoke inhalation or burn cases. So imagine what the results might be. We could cut down response times possibly. We could maybe more efficiently and safely evacuate or move patients out of a disaster area or a hazard area. But for an emergency manager, this feels a little bit like having a superpowered assistant right there with you that lets you focus on coordinating maybe with the face-to-face things like interacting with the fire department or law enforcement. On-scene staff who might be there working out of an SUV. But that allows you to know that the patient routing and the resource allocation is happening in the background, and it lets you focus on kind of those things that are in front of you. We'll hop on to the next slide here. Again, just a few more examples of different instances of how technology is useful across kind of a few different buckets here. So I just want to kind of call out a few of these, or we talked a little bit about rapid data analysis. Alerting and notification is something that I think is becoming a little bit more front and center in people's minds, how we're receiving information that allows us to act appropriately in response to an emergency that we might be faced with. So Sometimes we're able to pre-can that messaging ahead of time. But again, we're seeing new and more diverse types of emergencies that we're being faced with. Sometimes that doesn't really fit neatly into the alerting platforms that we've had before. So we have to kind of craft something in the moment, and we have to know that it's going to be useful and impactful and actionable for the folks who we are sharing it out to. So some of these new tools, we've seen things, and we'll talk a little bit about tools like ChatGPT and stuff like that, can help us to kind of get ourselves in the ballpark with messaging that's tailored and refined over successive prompts to incite the kind of action that we're looking for across different groups in our communities. Jump down there kind of the middle, evaluating special needs. Again, we have a lot of different data inputs, public health data that's available, things like evaluating different determining factors for classifying different groups as being socially vulnerable to emergencies. These data sets are out there. They're becoming more accessible to emergency managers in the planning phase, but also during the response phase when we're going to have to be faced with the route of, say, a tornado that impacted our community, and we want to know about the populations that were directly affected, whether or not any of those folks were previously on a special needs registry, or if there's certain tailored resources that were required to get out to support them appropriately. These tools can help us get those insights quickly that we can then transition into kind of an operational response that gets the right people or the right tools to these folks, or allows us to maybe stand up some of the accompanying structures that are out there, like a special needs shelter that might need to get opened in your community. So kind of understanding that bandwidth across all these different inputs is something that technology can help us along with, rather than, like I said, maybe combing through historical plans or things like that you never know, they might not be super updated right now. We'll jump to the next one. One of the big areas here that I think probably is an evergreen topic in the news right now is artificial intelligence. It's something that is, we've kind of opened Pandora's box a little bit to release this onto the public stage, and people are oftentimes concerned a little bit about maybe where this is going, but they just want to know a little bit more. But research into artificial intelligence, it may seem like it, but it's not a brand new science. It dates back to the 40s and 50s when some of the very early systems and even kind of the theory behind these systems was developed. The actual first AI program was built in 1956, if you can believe it. And the first chatbot came along just 10 years later in 1966. So this is something that it's been progressively improving over time. We're just now figuring out a little bit more how we can integrate these things into our operations. But in theory, if I can just give a simple explanation, AI is something that has four outputs that we know well, text, image, video, and audio, which are much more familiar and not as, let's call it radical, as when things like the television or camera, internet, social media, or any other of those kind of paradigm shifting mediums came out. These are familiar outputs that we know. We just have to figure out how to get to them a little bit better, and that just takes a little bit of training. But AI essentially is working with you to create those desired outputs. But what makes it so impactful is its ability to act on command. Next slide. So the question here too that comes up from time to time is how smart is our artificial intelligence tools? And these are some things that changes, like again, a kind of a quantum pace here. There are companies out there, organizations out there that will track the intelligence of artificial intelligence or machine learning softwares. And usually they do that by kind of performing comparable IQ tests. So typically, a lot of the platforms that you're going to see or you might interact with, those are the GPTs and things like that that you can go on the websites and put in prompts for. Those have historically kind of gotten a result of around 70 or an 80 on an IQ test. A human, for reference, usually can score in the neighborhood of 100. But newer advanced models like ChatGPT has their O1 or Strawberry model that's recently come on the scene a little bit. That was also given these kinds of tests, and the score that it received was 124. So if you can imagine, only about 2% of the human population gets to a level of IQ that's above 130. That's considered a genius level IQ. So can imagine that these tools in a pretty quick period of time have advanced that much more. And we're even giving them some of the tests that we would give to medical students and things like that in biology and engineering and things like this. And we're seeing some pretty comparable results, if you will. So they're getting smarter, which just means that we have the ability to leverage them more and more. But it also means that we need to be mindful about how we incorporate these into our operations and the guardrails that we might need to put in place on these. Next slide. So again, kind of one of the key technologies here we think about it is probably something like ChatGPT. I'm not paid by ChatGPT, so I will say there's a bunch of different other platforms out there. This is just one that has a little bit better name recognition, if you will. These are generative pre-trained transformers. So these basically you're successively putting in prompts in there that you can refine over time. Where you can say, today you're acting, as an emergency manager, and I'm looking for you to develop a plan that has to do with evacuation or sheltering of special needs. So maybe you're not an expert in this place, but it can help get you in the ballpark, and it can produce a result very rapidly. And if that's not quite what you're looking for, you can tweak it over time right there in the interface. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer. But it'll get you started. So it's like we talked about earlier with messaging and things like that. Maybe you need to say, what are some tips that I need to be aware of if I'm out in the community and I'm being impacted by an earthquake because maybe something came across your feed that you're concerned about. Maybe I want to make those specific to healthcare. Maybe I want to make those specific to a government office or something like that. You can refine the prompt a little bit, and it can give you things to be mindful about. Maybe some things that you need to check structurally that you can then translate into kind of actionable tasks for your team out there to go ahead and perform. So again, just something to think about. If you haven't opened these, I usually, when I talk about artificial intelligence, I ask folks in the audience to raise their hand if they've maybe opened one of these tools before. And surprisingly, even though it's been on the scene for a couple of years now and getting better, it's pretty low number of hands that go up sometimes. I think there's an intimidation factor that goes on here. So I would just encourage folks to maybe go in there and play around with some of the prompts. Don't get anything too secure information wise that you want to put in there, but ask it some questions if you've got something that you want to learn a little bit more about and see what it crafts for you, because it's an amazing tool. And like I said, they're getting smarter seemingly every day. Next slide. All righty. So again, these are just some more emergency management specific examples. I know we have a limited amount of time, so I won't belabor the point too much here because I think we've talked about a few of these before. But I do want to say again, early warning and effective communication is something that's absolutely vital for sharing instructions and updates with the public. So tools like AI, and I won't focus solely on artificial intelligence here, but they can create messaging. And again, they can create it in multiple languages that are tailored for different communities and can be shared through multiple channels. So if you imagine websites, phone applications, social media, etc., AI assistants, can rapidly answer people's questions as well about a crisis through text, or now we're even seeing better and better quality voice responses through natural language processing systems. So these are tools that are being more and more incorporated here. And we're thinking about warning and public messaging. We're thinking about the vast amounts of data streams that are coming into emergency managers. And these are absolutely important to be able to leverage to help us understand and operationalize those streams of information. And then those gives us those tangible results like you see in the box there about being able to improve our supply chain. So if we want to think about how we can save money by improving some of the routes that we're maybe distributing essential equipment and things like that, AI tools can actually help us with that with some of the mapping functions that are available. And I think that's on one of the slides coming up, actually. So we'll jump to the next one here. Yep, there we go. There's the mapping one. I knew it was coming up. These are some maybe my non-emergency ways that software, next generation software, tools like artificial intelligence or machine learning and things like that can be incorporated into kind of our everyday operations. If I stick with just one of these here, about mapping and routing. We've seen this deployed in places like indoor navigation for systems that can provide folks with turn-by-turn directions, whether that's within hospitals or organizations that have a heavy foot traffic of people that come in, and we need to route them through this so they don't get lost on the way. If I'm thinking about things like reunification or family assistance centers that have a lot of different stations that people need to hit, these kinds of tools can help serve as a virtual assistant, if you will, for folks that need to manage their going through the different tables of services that can be provided following an emergency. So also things like continuous improvement and professional development. If we're looking at setting targets for ourselves or creating metrics to track the successes of our operations, we can maybe use these tools to help kind of create some insightful things that we can then track for ourselves if we want to set goals for maybe productivity. Sometimes writing those targets or smart goals, as we all heard before, can be a difficult thing. So this can help get us in the ballpark a little bit better. But I want to make sure we hit on these next couple slides. So let's jump to the next one. Drones. Here we go. Pilotless aircraft, drones, unmanned aerial systems. I know we hear about these in the sky a lot, but they can be drones that are used underwater. I'll tell you, when we had the Piney Point incident that took place up in Manatee County, we did use drones to go look into the water of some of those pools there to see how we were patching or what the impact of some of our strategies for mitigating those leaks or keeping the leak. Those tools were out there too, but these kinds of things, drones, they vary in size and cost, the different operator expertise that's required compared to things like manned platforms, airplanes and helicopters. It's usually a lower bar, but it's still a pretty a complicated credential to get. So we have to be kind of aware of that as well. But they can be deployed with little to no fuel cost and significantly less startup time than acquiring a helicopter, for example. But they can be used in an emergency management sense to conduct very precise surveys of rivers, coastal waterways, our critical infrastructure, roadways and bridges. They can monitor things like changes to our erosion levels and just assist us in forecasting and performing those assessments of flood-prone areas, for example, to understand the impacts that might occur. And all this information can, again, give emergency managers that edge that allows them to kind of pre-plan maybe things like public education campaigns or create and stage early warning messages, and just maybe even we have the opportunity to then improve timing for kind of local evacuations. So if you can imagine, if we have a big storm bearing down on us and we need to survey our roadways and our bridges ahead of time to get kind of more recent documentation on those, we can deploy drone teams if we have that capability rather than putting a helicopter up in the air. All right, let's jump on to the next one here. Chatbots and virtual assistants. This is something that's probably a little bit more familiar to folks, so I won't spend too much time here so we can get to the last couple of slides today. But these are things that we may have interacted with. We're seeing them deployed a little bit more. Again, oftentimes these are relying on natural language processing systems, machine learning things. This is a bit of an AI connect here, but we're seeing the usefulness of deploying AI-powered chatbots and things like that. On our websites, maybe we have a public health campaign and we're expecting a lot of information requests from the public, and we want to provide them with a certain set of answers. These tools can be built out to do that, so we're not overwhelming maybe the limited staffing that we have at our switchboards, if you will, our public safety answering points, if we have to stand up those kind of call centers and things like that. If we train these chatbots to provide clear and accurate answers that can help people understand or get some context around the situation that they're being faced with, that can be a force multiplier that saves us from having to put that human manpower to compensate for those kind of high influx of calls that might come through. All right, let's jump to the next one here. Okay. Software applications here, apps. How many people have the phone is completely cluttered with apps and you can barely even tell what time it is or find your calendar? That's certainly my phone, even though I try to organize it as best I can. But software applications like this are in a way transforming disaster recovery from being reactive to proactive data-driven processes. By using technology like this strategically, we're able to build a little bit more resiliency and efficiency into our systems. We have mobile and web-based apps that you're seeing kind of in some of the pictures there. Collector and Crisis Track are some that might sound familiar to folks in the emergency management space. These are being used by damage assessment teams from all levels of government to kind of quickly and consistently evaluate impacted structures during field operations. And a lot of times they have minimal training to get folks up to speed and able to deploy them. And they also have form templates that are built in for most assessment types, including things like FEMA's individual assistance and their substantial damage estimator. They can help us to not only locate structures, but capture photos of the damage and even then assist with calculating damage costs from connections to tax assessment records and things like that. And they're also usually able to contend with maybe kind of low connectivity areas so they can upload after the fact. Again, that just gives great insights to folks that may be in an emergency operations center who are not able to get out there in the field but want to know what's going on. So that can help make our decisions a little bit better. All right, let's jump to the next one here. It's just kind of a few buckets of things to think about. And again, I believe everybody here is going to get the slides so you can see some of the different things a little bit here. But I want to talk a little bit just about internet access and how it's really become a lifeline for folks during emergencies. And if we are able to, and we can kind of take that comprehensive or multifaceted approach to allow us to connect different tools to our emergency preparedness priorities at the community level, we can, of course, then use those to build more resilient, more connected, and more responsive systems for our folks out there that help us protect and support everyone as best as we can during critical times. So early warning, again, I've kind of hit on that. We've seen some of these tools early warning systems that are by internet connected sensors that are available out there. We saw those even deployed back in 2011 in places like Japan when they were faced with tsunamis. They can give folks those critical minutes of advance notice that can help save thousands of lives out there. But mobile apps, they can, instantly be used to disseminate critical information about these kind of approaching disasters, evacuation routes, changes, safety instructions that we need to give folks. They're just great resources. And technology, again, we're able to get better and better situational awareness into our emergency operations centers that can help local officials make better decisions. We can connect those with social media and other online platforms that are very impactful and helpful because that's where a lot of people go to receive their information nowadays. We'll go to the last one here. Just some kind of maybe things to be thoughtful of here if you're going forward to adopting some technology and you want to try your best to do this thoughtfully. This is just kind of some take-home homework, if you will. I won't hit on every one of these, but just some best practices to help get you in the bucket here to think about how to adopt new technologies into your operations. But that's all I'll say for now. And I know we're probably going to take some questions here, but maybe we ran a little bit long. It's hard to not get excited when we talk about technology. So thanks very much.
Tom, very exciting. You're staying on. So everybody, we're mindful of time. There's a couple announcements we want to make. We want to thank Tom. Real quick before we lose any of you, we want to let you know that we're going to have our Q&A session and conversation continue on after 11:30. And we're really quick going to take a picture of this wonderful group. So Kiera, I'm going to turn it over to you for a quick photo. Everyone can come on real quick on camera. Don't worry about where you are.
Yes, I'll do a countdown in 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And real quick before we get back to Tom, and we hope you'll all stay on for that extra 15 minutes of Q&A, I want to turn it over to Andrew Spector to talk a little bit about our new DA4A LinkedIn group. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. I'll speak quickly because I know we're here at 11:30, but we're really excited that we launched a few days ago a LinkedIn discussion group about digital access for all. So you're all invited to it. It's going to be a terrific opportunity asynchronously for us to connect and collaborate and to discuss some thought-provoking questions about digital access. So if we can move to the next slide, you'll see that there's a QR code and then you can type this link in. Donna is also going to put into the chat that link to join the group. It's totally free, and I think it'll be valuable for anybody here that's involved in or interested in expanding your knowledge and skills with digital access.
Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate it. So far, we've got a great group of people that have joined, and we want to continue that conversation. So I want to again say thank you for those of you that are here right now that might have to leave at 11:30, but I want to share a couple things. our upcoming webinars, our second webinar on January 23rd with the entitled The Role of the Century, Digital Navigator Evolution with Maribel Martinez, one of our consultants for the long term over digital access for all with the Patterson Foundation. You're going to get all of this information as a follow-up. And then our third webinar, we're going to be talking about the Florida Broadband Strategic Plan update and a roadmap to the future of broadband. So that's February 6th. Please feel free to sign up and share those. Thank you all so much. For those of you that are here today, don't go away. We're going to go back to Tom right now, and we're going to do some Q&A. And continue this conversation. So Tom, anyone on here that would like to bring anything forward? We've got a couple questions that came to us initially, so let's go through those. We heard from someone asking, what are some real world examples of artificial intelligence enhancing disaster response and recovery efforts, and what measurable impacts have they had on affected communities? This is probably a very recent thing that's transpired.
Absolutely. And it is. I think it's one of those things that we're kind of becoming more and more aware that artificial intelligence is something that government operations are leveraging a little bit more. NOAA, which for the folks that on here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they use AI algorithms to improve hurricane track and intensity predictions. So if you've maybe seen kind of the history, if you will, of the graphics that we receive ahead of a significant weather event, I think everybody in Florida has probably seen the cone that we're all a little bit concerned about. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult maybe to operationalize. So if you're noticing or you're seeing improvements in those forecasting tools that are out there, maybe they're coming with a little bit more insights that you feel are specific to you, National Weather Service and NOAA are absolutely are leaning on these things to better craft the messaging that folks receive. They're improving their models. Of course, they're giving us more advanced notice in their predictions. I think before sometimes we might be lucky to kind of, once we get to that 48-hour point, then we kind of know a little bit more what to do. But now they're able to push that out more and more because we're currently really aware of the rapid intensification of some of these weather systems. So the more time folks have to make those determinations with effective forecasts, I think the better that is for their planning. But I mean, as far as measurable impacts, I mean, that's a tough one, but it's a good one. Reduced response times, I think, are one that from a person with a public safety background, we're seeing kind of AI interventions being demonstrated with their ability to cut down emergency response times by a fairly significant percentage in different scenarios by kind of giving us more pre-alerting opportunity. Like I said, tailoring more information that comes in through computer automated dispatch systems for our response units that are out there to maybe get a little bit better insights about where they're going to, what those disasters or even smaller emergencies are looking like in kind of day to day. We're seeing the impact of better communications, better early warning. Again, we're more accurate early warning systems and then those rapid damage assessments after the fact. Many folks might not know those damage assessments and getting those totals, those figures, even if they're preemptive, are very critical in unlocking funding that comes from the government that allows us to kind of perform those big actions that are out there. So the quickness of those kind of tools in all of our communities, they're out there. You see folks maybe after an emergency and they've got the iPads out there and they're kind of scanning different things. That collection of information, it helps us to get that figure that allows us then to unlock those funds, what allows us to make those real big tangible changes in our response and recovery from an emergency. So I guess that's a few that I'll hit on. I can go into more, but I want to get to a couple different questions.
That's great. There's another question that someone sent me, but in the interim, while we're talking about that, raise your hand if you have a question that's come up based on what Tom was speaking about. So Tom, you touched on, this question from someone is, you touched on drones and how they're deployed. Can you give an example in this past recent months of how those have been helpful, maybe specifics closer to you possibly than even Florida?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing drones be deployed more thoughtfully throughout of the different phases of emergency management. Again, we mentioned during the earlier part of the discussion here, the preparedness planning aspect. Here in Pennsylvania, we've got a lot of significant waterways that are out there. So kind of flood planning and what's that impact is going to look like to some of our more dense communities that fall along the riverway. We've actually got some rivers that go right down into the Philadelphia area, and understanding the impacts of any kind of, if we've got some maybe upstream snow that melts, comes down to the river, what we're going to do to make the determination of whether those are at action stage, if we need to let any relief dams go earlier on that can kind of lessen the impacts of flooded waterways on significant or high population areas, are something that we're definitely seeing up here. Drones, though, I mean, they have a lot of great uses, and I really think it can be a challenge. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to let the folks who might not have a local drone program feel like they're missing out. There's a lot of cost that can go into the startup and the training there and understanding the FAA regulations to even put a drone up in the air. But they come with great high resolution imagery from above. They can map disaster impacts. I can imagine. Of course, I wasn't boots on the ground down there with some of the recent storm impacts, but if your disaster response teams or your first in teams that are out there clearing roadways are looking at areas that maybe they can't are impassable from kind of the immediate damage, you can put a drone up there. You can fly a grid over a disaster affected area, and then you can determine where to route your resources a little bit more effectively. Or if you need to kind of 3D map the models that need to be created for understanding those community-wide impacts, drones can be useful in that as well. Search and rescue is another thing too. We do have folks up here where sometimes they get stuck out in the woods. Pennsylvania is a pretty forested state, so drones are outfitted with a lot of really cool technology. They have FLIR cameras, infrared imaging, thermal detections, and stuff like that. We can put those up in the air if somebody's missing. So that's a personal disaster, maybe not a community-wide one, but we can put a drone up out there. We can fly a certain area, and maybe we can figure out how to direct on-the-ground resources to a heat signature or something like that. We've even seen fire departments use them as well. I know back down that way, Southern Manatee Fire, for example, has a pretty robust drone operations program that they can put up that can even be used to do some sampling during hazardous materials incidents as well. So if you want to put something into a hot zone that you might not be capable of putting a human being in quite yet, or you just want to understand the hazards in that area, you can put a drone up in the air with one of those kinds of 4-gas meter collectors to go out and give you a better understanding of what chemicals might be present. So anything that can kind of lessen the threat to individual responders,
Wow.
I think is huge.
In like 4 minutes, you've like amazingly described what a drone's capability can do. Joni Hansen on our screen here, she's got a question. We're going to have her come off mic, and Joni, go right ahead.
Hi there, Joni Hansen, Digital Navigator for the Patterson Foundation. And when I'm working with clients, we have sometimes they just want to learn as much as they can. A lot of them come in don't know much about digital needs, but how could I engage them on a ground level with AI that would be exciting for them, but yet not too much? So like, is there an app they could put on their phone, the Chat GPT perhaps?
Absolutely. I think one of the big barriers to even trying out artificial intelligence tools or artificial intelligence fueled tools, if you will, is maybe not everybody feels so tech savvy to crack open one of those apps. Maybe they're a little bit concerned. I mean, like I said, they're ever present in the news media where we hear kind of the dangers associated with some of these AI tools that are out there and deep fakes and things like that. But really, I mean, in the day-to-day, tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or things like that, they're meant to be enhancements for our work. So I would definitely encourage folks to really just start at that level, go to a tool like that, especially if you have a problem that you want to solve, but you can just ask it a question, if you will. But for example, say you're tasked with making an evacuation plan for your facility, whatever that might be, as response to a fire event or something like that. And maybe you've never made one of those. You can go in there and say, hey, today, ChatGPT, you're an emergency preparedness planner, and we're going to develop a evacuation plan for a long-term care facility, for example. I'd like to make sure that this accounts for the different types of residents that we care for, the staff that we have, and XYZ processes that we want to put in. So you can kind of frame it that way and just see the result that it'll spit out for you. I'll tell you, it's if you've never done it before, it's an amazing production that can get you in the ballpark. Even if you want to write an email, maybe you're struggling with an email or how to respond to a question that somebody had, or you want to make a memo announcing something at your operation, frame it. Think about the voice that it's going to come in, whether that's overly technical, that's social, it's very personable. Do you want it in a paragraph form, or do you want it in a bulleted list? Give it some of those conditions and give it the problem statement, and then see what it produces for you. And then you can adapt it from there. And I think just that interesting experience will get people a little bit more comfortable or familiar with how to use those kinds of tools. And then you can go on from there. Not everybody's going to have the NASA supercomputer element of how we use AI, but those kind of things are approachable in everybody's day-to-day life, I think.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks, Joni. Thanks, Tom. Okay, one more question, Laura. You raise your hand. Feel free to come off mic and ask your question.
Hi, good morning, Laura Reese, Manatee County Community and Veteran Services. So my question is in relationship to local government. Has there been an incline from local government agencies utilizing artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's not. I'll expand. I don't want to just give you a one-word answer. But yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think we're seeing more government entities out there, whether that's at all levels. I'll kind of make that as a broad statement. So whether that's local or state or federal governments are absolutely using these tools or building these tools into their planning as ways to kind of maybe better connect, like I said, our messaging with different diverse populations that are out there. I know I can speak to the emergency management site at local government, but also at state and federal government. Sometimes we might not operate in all of the different communities or have a really steep understanding of how those communities connect with the messaging that we're trying to provide. We know we want something to happen, but maybe we're not the best at saying it with the voice or saying it with the words that people hear that then inspires action. So, I mean, you can probably extrapolate that across other diverse perspectives from government rather than emergency management, but people are using these kind of tools to glean more insights. Again, we have so many more new data sets that are coming into us, that we can overlay this information on things like GIS maps that can give us kind of context-aware insights into social vulnerable populations. Maybe we're looking at things like census data, and we want to understand where folks in our community who are not as able to, they're transportation deficient. They don't have access to cars and things like that. So we want to say, well, how do they evacuate better? Or do we need to stage resources into those areas because they need to get onto a bus or something like that we can take to a shelter? That we could go out into those communities, we can do the manual effort, and we can kind of door knock and talk to maybe elected officials that are responsible for those districts. And I still think that we should. That's a good way to build partnerships out there. But maybe we want to take some insights that we glean from kind of connecting with these different tools into that conversation to say, hey, fact check me here. I feel like a good percentage of this population may have some transportation challenges. Maybe they're not hearing our information. Maybe they're not responding to our campaigns to get folks signed up for tools like Everbridge or Code Red that push out those reverse 911 messages. Is this true? Do you feel like, and you're talking to your constituents out there, that they're not receiving the information? And then how do we target public education campaigns to then give those folks the messages that they need to hear in order to adopt our kind of tools out there? So, I mean, there's a ton of different ways that you can probably apply those tools, and governments are. But again, I think maybe on the federal or national level, we're seeing governments understand that technology access is something that is a barrier to a lot of folks, and we don't want to kind of create this two-class system: folks that have access to and understand technology, and folks that are intimidated by it or don't have access to it. And those are different kinds of populations there. I think we plan for, gosh, it's at least 26% of the population in any given area probably is not tech savvy or tech accessible. So when we're only relying on tech forward tools, we're only pushing things out through stuff that goes onto an app on your phone, and you have a clamshell phone, or you have essentially like a rotary phone, you're not able to receive that. So if that's the only path we're going, we can't force people into this kind of technology corner. We need to bring them up to speed and demystify those tools, and also partner them with kind of the real world or boots on the ground things. If we have to put our messages on the message board at a local grocery store or something like that, or go to a church meeting or something, that's fine. We might have a tech tool that we might use as our first option, but we need to be able to get out there and get the information that people need where they're ready to receive it. So I will say that maybe a long answer, or maybe I shifted into emergency manager mode there a little bit, but governments absolutely are finding new
Actually,
ways.
Tom, you shifted right into the Digital Access for All initiative, and it was an amazing way to close out how we try to make sure that the people that are underserved have connectivity, devices, and skills training and support. So love to sit around a little bit longer, but we know everybody's got a schedule today. Tom, you have really kicked off our Suncoast Digital Connect Learning Thursdays webinar series with an amazing presentation that's got all of us thinking about the next day and the next day in the future, as we know technology change. So we want to thank everyone for participating today and staying on for the continued conversation. You will be receiving a follow-up with all of the information that you heard about, the PowerPoint and recording of this meeting, and we hope that you will join our Digital Access for All LinkedIn group. We hope that you'll sign up for the remaining 2 series webinars, and we hope that we will see you in person as you register for the Suncoast Connect Symposium for March 11th and 12th in Sarasota, Florida. So thank you all so much for being here today.